back to another episode of Us Anxious Folk. I am here with the lovely Felicia from California. Felicia is a mum to two, and I was just saying to her, someone that I've been talking to back and forth for quite a few years now, but it's nice to actually finally meet you. So thank you for being on the show, Felicia.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So tell me your anxiety story, if you will.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to try to make it brief like your last your last guest. I started having anxiety when I was 11.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 37 now. So it's been chronic since I was 11. And I would started with a massive panic attack at an elementary school when I saw my sister go off to 6th grade camp. So I was there on the blacktop seeing her go, and all of a sudden the typical panic feelings started coming, and I'd never experienced this. Obviously it's my first time, but it freaked me out big time. And then I was 11, so I was around like puberty age, and then ever since then it was like back to back to back panic attacks, and it got so bad that I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't go to school anymore. My mom was really freaked out, didn't know how to help me. She took me to the doctor. They couldn't find anything wrong with me. I had so many blood tests. They kept checking my thyroid. Couldn't find anything wrong with me physically. But I couldn't sleep. I would pace our apartment. And I just avoided being outside at all times. It was really, that lasted for a good year, I would say. That ended basically with my mom just caved and said, well, why don't we just get you some medication? Because she was getting threats from the school saying she needs to be back in school. She can't be gone this long. And so it was a very traumatic time, extremely traumatic, because there were a lot of rumors going around at school, even though I wasn't popular or anything, but people were wondering where I was, and suspicion started to rise. Anyway, so I was put on some medication, and that did work. It stopped the panic attacks, but it didn't stop the intrusive thoughts. It didn't stop any new phobias to arise. So I went back to school. I was going through the motions. I was just kind of numbed out. I was just kind of checked out. But I was just grateful to be functioning. And then it pretty much stayed stagnant until I got to about 10th grade, where the doctor thought that maybe my panic attacks were returning because my medication had worn off. And I thought that was really odd, like kind of like an antibiotic, where after a while you get desensitized to it. So they put me on something else, and that worked, thank goodness. And then again, it was just going through the motions. And so I wanted to go off it so bad, but at the same time I was scared if I did, I would just not be functional, and it would just wreck my life. So then once I met my husband and we decided to have kids and everything, I wanted to go off it for my first pregnancy. We went really, really slow with my doctor. And I was working at a law firm at the time, and it got to the point where, again, I couldn't function without it. I couldn't drive. I couldn't leave the house. I was having round the clock panic attacks again. And the doctor just saying, well, you must just have a chemical imbalance. You need this medication. We've gone as super slow as we can go, and this is just how you're wired, and you're going to have to go back on it if you don't want to be this way. So of course I'm scared. I'm like, okay, of course. But I just tried to pick the one that was the least dangerous for a pregnancy, the one that had been around the longest. And thankfully that worked. I took it for both pregnancies. Unfortunately, I had it with on. I shouldn't say unfortunately. They are fine, but that's not how I wanted it.
Yeah.
That's not how I wanted it.
Yep.
So that's been pretty much the basis from it. I mean, I've been on medication this whole time since I was 11, and with various periods of trying to get off of it and not being able to successfully. And now I'm at the point where, like, gosh, maybe it's because I've been on it so long now that even if I go really, really slow, it's going to take a lot longer. And so I'm scared to go down that road again, because, like, well, now I have little ones and I can't be functional. And that scares me.
Yeah.
I try to look at it. People said to me, well, it's like, like a diabetic, you need the insulin.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, you just need this certain medication to make you functional. And some days that works for me. And other days I'm like, this is not okay. I'd like to not be on this.
Yeah.
And, but it's still a constant struggle daily because I do still have intrusive thoughts. My fears have heightened or manifested into other things over the years, like things I didn't fear back when I was that age, or
Mm.
definitely think about a lot now in fear, and things that I used to do, I don't do now, or I really put way more thought into it.
Mhm.
So it's definitely still a big part of my life. And I've been through so many modes of therapy. It still hasn't gotten me to the point where I feel like, okay, I got this under control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There, I feel like there's a lot to unpack with
There's so,
everything you
I know
just
it's really heavy, right?
said. No, it's just
It's like, where do
I
you
like,
begin with that? Yeah.
well, there's so much that sticks out at me.
Yeah.
But working my way backwards,
Yeah.
the first thing is how you said, in terms of the medication, the diabetic comparison. I don't know why, but that has always bugged me from the first time I heard
See,
it.
yeah,
I
that's how
just,
I
I
feel.
don't,
It
yeah, I
doesn't
don't
seem
relate to it.
comparable to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same thing, I feel like. And I know that they recently finally disproved the chemical imbalance theory.
Yes, I saw
Um,
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
which I have to say was really validating in a lot of ways because I
Yeah.
never bought that. And I was
Okay.
annoyed when I
Okay.
kept being told that.
Yes.
So,
Because it feels completely out of your control. And what are you supposed to do with
correct.
that information? Yeah.
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 Yeah. And it's frustrating. And so
Hmm.
you've is it two different
Hmm.
medications that you've been on throughout the whole time?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, I can imagine, I mean, I'm putting feelings in your mouth, but for me,
Right.
I felt trapped being on medication and wanting to come off, but
Yeah.
being scared of not functioning.
Right.
Um, and so is there an element of that, or are
Hmm.
you mostly just, accepting of taking medication?
I think it's a little bit of both because I've become so, it's default. I've been on
Yeah.
it for so long that it's just
Yeah.
part of my everyday and I don't think about it. And then there's other days where I'm just like, this is not okay. But I'm also scared of, again,
Yeah,
going
for
through that,
sure.
of being not functional. And um yeah, that because I couldn't have thought of a safer, better way to do it, and
Mm,
yet I still quote unquote failed. um
yeah.
so that, yeah, there's definitely a fear element to that as well. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of I mean,
Yeah.
if you've been on a medication since you were
Yeah.
11,
Yeah.
um, I guess that would, you know, your hormones would almost rely on that sort of balance being in
Yeah.
there, if that makes sense.
Right.
Balance isn't the right
Right.
word, but
Yeah, I know
so
what
I
you mean.
wasn't surprised when you
Yeah.
said was it as a teenager that you the medication allegedly wore off?
Yes, that's what the doctors, yeah, that's when it's like, why am I having panic attacks again? And I couldn't go to school for a period of time again in
Yeah,
10th grade. Yeah. And so it
yeah,
had to be again, let's find something else for you. But again, their therapies and things of that nature weren't explored
yeah.
at that time
Okay.
for myself. It was because there was such a rush, I think, from the school and from my family to just get me fixed.
Hmm.
Um, Not a whole lot of thought was put into it. It was just, we want to get this kick, nip this in the bud and get you back on your feet and move along. And,
Yeah,
you know, and I wonder now too, because my daughter's around the same age, if that's going to start coming up. And there's a lot of thoughts that go through my head when it comes to that. And I just keep crossing my fingers that it was just because I had a traumatic childhood. And I just think maybe it was more environmental,
okay.
than genetic or um, anything else. I just feel like maybe that had more of an impact than I thought
Yeah.
at the time, because
It's
that's all you know at
always,
the time.
yeah, yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
it. It's
Hmm.
and that first panic attack, I mean, I
Yeah.
all the people I've spoken to, that's
Yeah.
pretty much been the story. Like I had this first panic attack and it
Yeah.
just from there, it
From then on.
spiraled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you
It did
mentioned
immediately.
phobias. What were
Yes.
your fears like back then, if
Hmm.
you could back when you were around 11 years old, like
Oh
what?
gosh, it was, well, besides agoraphobia, open spaces, it was doctors' offices. Like, because I guess because I went so much and they kept testing me. And one time I fainted right after they took my blood, and I was like, oh God, well, I'd never fainted before. So that
Wow.
probably opened up a gateway of a phobia there. I just remember just feeling like very out of control. So I guess I was more focused around medical situations, but in a smaller way than it is now. Like
Mhm.
now I think it's gotten a lot bigger, more specific. But back then it was just like, I just don't want to have to go to a hospital. I don't want to have to go to the doctor's office. I don't have to get more tests.
Mhm.
I don't want there to be anything physically wrong with me. And then I started to obsess about nutrition labels. I would read the labels and I didn't even know what it meant, but I would look at it going, oh, there's too much
It's doing
salt, there's too
something.
much sugar. Yeah, right. And I'm like,
Mm.
I'm 11, 12, and now I'm obsessing about it. But I remember no one really saying anything to me about it of like, well, trying to get it under control. It was just very glossed over. So that allowed me to continue to go down that road,
Mhm.
and it intensified,
Yeah.
unfortunately, until I was able to kind of be on my own and take the bull by the horns and explore the methods to get me help.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what sort of other methods did that involve?
Um, lots of cognitive behavioral therapy, so a lot of talk therapy.
Mhm.
Um, I did some exposure therapy, so things that at the time that I was scared of was getting my blood drawn, or like I said, being in a medical setting. Um, but again, it was like there's really no point for me to be in those places a lot of the time, so it was more just okay, if that's convenient for you, go and try that out or whatnot. But so it was more, at that time, it was more talk therapy. And then I've tried art therapy and somatic therapy
Mhm.
and hypnosis. Um, and I've really come to the conclusion, I think, in my mind that I have a lot of stored trauma. And in order to release that, my nervous system really needs a whole reset. And it's more than just thoughts now. It's because I used to think it's, oh, once I get rid of these intrusive thoughts, once I get this under control, once I start doing things that I used to be afraid of, this will even out and it'll
Mhm.
be better. But now I feel like it's way more complicated and layered than that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And we're
Plus,
not
it's
just
like
we're not just
default.
brains walking around, we're
No,
bodies.
no,
So,
exactly. The
yeah.
mind body connection is huge. Yes, yes. But it took me years to really let that sink in and realize that, because I was just, like I said, on default mode for so long, just survival mode, just go through the motions, go through school, get your degrees, have the kids, whatever. And it's
Mhm.
not until these last couple of years that I've really set aside more time to prioritize and figure out how best to get this under control, because it feels like it's definitely, healing is not linear, I know, so it's a constant up and down, but at the same time it feels like certain things have intensified or been blown out of proportion,
Yeah.
way more than they were like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't want to keep on this trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, in saying that though, like we've had a hell of a couple of years, you know.
Oh, yeah.
There's been a
No
lot
kidding.
happening.
Yes, big time. Yeah, that didn't help. No, not
Yeah.
at all.
I think everyone said that. Yeah, that didn't
Yes,
improve things.
didn't help. Yeah.
Are you a lawyer? Because you said you were working in a law firm.
Oh no, I wasn't. No, I was in a law firm, but I was, no, I was a paralegal slash
Right.
receptionist, so I'd go
Okay.
between the two.
Okay.
Um,
And how did that affect you? I imagine that'd be a pretty hectic job.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
How
it
did you manage
was.
all of that?
I was just I kind of just fell into that job because my mother-in-law at the time. Anyway, I fell into that job. So it wasn't like, oh, I want to be a lawyer. I want to get my foot in the door. I was like, oh, there's a job open. I'm in college. I need to pay bills. Let's do this. It was
Like
extremely
me.
difficult. Yes, exactly. Just, yeah, I'm in college. I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I'm going to do this and work. It was extremely difficult, at times, uh, because there were days where I couldn't, it's like, how am I even going to be able to get in the car and go to work?
Yeah.
And just doing it anyway, because like fake it till you make it. And that's how I felt like no one ever knew either. No one had any idea. I could be really in a state of high anxiety and I could hold it together because I didn't want anyone to know about it. I
Yeah.
didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how anyone would understand it because even my husband to this day doesn't really know how to handle it. It's just, okay, that's you and I'm here, but I don't know what to say. And so I thought, well, of course, these people aren't going to know what to do. So um, luckily, I never had to take any full time off or anything. I didn't have to, be on disability or anything like that. But I went to the bathroom a lot just to like get away, just to clear my head, just to try to get my thoughts under control, take some deep breaths and reset and then go back. And yeah, and then I was really glad when I left because I was like, I'm really not mentally okay to do this on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. It's funny though how
Going,
much we can function, um, like we can be going through absolute hell in our minds and bodies, and yet on the outside it can look like we're managing,
yeah,
holding down
yes,
job, raising
yes,
kids. Like it's crazy.
yeah,
And like you said, not mentioning it to people, like going to such great
yes,
lengths to appear
hmm,
normal or like you're okay.
yes, yes, yes.
And that can be very lonely as well. Like, did you have
Oh
anyone
yeah,
that you could
yeah.
open up to?
Yeah, I had my mom and my sister and my husband and everything, but it was it wasn't helpful in the moment other than to vent. Uh, if I was in a heightened state of panic, yeah, I could call and they would kind of talk me down, but that rush, that constant state of anxiety was never a
Hmm.
conversation wasn't enough
Yeah.
to calm me down.
Yeah.
Um, and my mom would say, "Well, why don't you just get some anti-anxiety meds, or just something to take the edge off?" And I was always very much no. I know people get addicted, and I know it's really hard to get off of it, and I don't want to have another thing on my plate.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I was always doing is like wouldn't accept the help, or I wouldn't even if I knew it probably could work for me. It was like I'd rather grit and bear it
Yeah.
and try to get it through and same with phone calls and reaching out to people. Is like no, I'm just gonna prove to myself that I got this, I can do this.
But then you're like, I
I
don't
didn't want
got
to be
this.
weak. I don't got this, but I look like I got it.
It reminds me of the author Matt Haig, how he said he never wanted to try Xanax or anything like that because he couldn't even handle taking a Panadol, like a paracetamol, and then the effects of that. So he's like, I
Yes,
just
yes,
avoided all the anti-anxiety medication because I couldn't cope with the idea of getting addicted to it or, it changing
right,
my, yeah, it's
right,
hard.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you mentioned hypnosis, which I've
yes.
only done that once. Um, and I get asked about it a fair bit, and I'm like, I've only done
Mm.
it once. So I don't know. Um,
Yeah,
but I
have to
think,
speak on it.
yeah, so many people are interested in those sort of therapies.
Yeah,
Um, how did you go with hypnotherapy and somatic therapy, art therapy?
it's more just like, what haven't I tried that could potentially work and get me off this medication and heal me. My sister's been very helpful as far as giving me recommend. She's not a therapist, but she's very much into psychology, and she would look things up for me and go, maybe she could try this, and she'd help me find people in the area. And so, as far as hypnosis, it's very in somatic therapy. It's very relaxing in the moment, and it's very, I would say, cathartic because there is a lot of things you can release in that moment. I don't think I did it long enough to fully get the benefit from it, and I did some of it was virtually. So I don't recommend it for to do it virtually when it's body work, and I prefer to be in person and really have that full experience, maybe to get more out of it. So I personally didn't find that it did much for me because, but again, I didn't stick to it long enough, most likely, and but again, in the moment, just like with talk therapy, it is therapeutic, and some things do come up when they're doing imagery and things of that nature that we're like, oh, that's really insightful, and
Yeah.
that feels like there's a release there. But overall, yeah, didn't feel like that was. And again, I'm not looking for one thing. It's not one thing, but
Yeah.
I was hoping for more of a game way, I guess, of steering me in the right direction. And okay, this is the one that I should concentrate on,
Yeah.
give the most attention to. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say, I found hypnosis to be very inspiring. Like I
Hmm.
felt quite motivated the day afterwards, but I I wasn't totally honest with the guy either. Like that was back
Oh,
when I didn't like talking about toilet anxiety. And so when he asked me, what are you
oh
here
yeah.
for? I was like, I just have bad panic attacks.
Oh yes,
And so
yes.
there was that
Yeah.
element of not letting people in enough to actually receive help. But yeah, I still
Yes.
I'd be interested to give it more of a try
Mhm.
and, like you said, have those sort of memories that come up
Mm.
or insights where maybe you
Yes.
realize you've been holding that, for a long time.
Yes. A lot of inner child stuff definitely comes through. And so I know there's a lot of that to work through,
Yeah.
um, that I need to explore more. Yeah.
It's like we're just big children inside, really.
Yeah. And we're stuck in time. And yeah, it's constantly crying out, wanting that attention. And it's like, I don't have time for you. And I don't know what to do. And I
Yeah.
got my own things going on. You have to wait. And then it just gets more intense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it feels like I'm constantly having to foster and baby that part of me
Yeah, of
so
course.
it doesn't get out of control.
Yeah. So
Um,
have you got something happening at the moment in terms of like a method? Like are you doing exposure
mhm.
therapy or are you just living and, and
Yeah,
taking it as it
it's mostly
comes?
just living. I'm not doing exposure now.
Yeah.
It's more just living, and one of the things that was really hard for me is to travel, but mostly because I don't want to be away from my comfort zone. It's just that's my safe haven, and so I overpack. We went on a camping trip last year, and I brought so many things in case, mostly food. Because I'm like, well, I don't want to get my blood sugar to drop, and I don't want to get cranky, and I just like,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean, like it was ridiculous, and so it put a damper on things. So I'm very mindful of that. So I try to just go outside my box more as far as trying new things. That's my goal.
Hmm.
Even it doesn't have to be exotic travel, but just enough where it's like you went 2 hours away. I'm
Yes.
supposed to go camping with my daughter for her Girl Scout troop, and I'm like, okay, I got to drive her there, spend 3 nights there.
Wow.
Okay, it's supposed to be a fun thing, but for me, it's just whew,
Yeah.
anxiety inducing. So I would say that's my main thing, and then I try to do incorporate journaling a lot every day, and take some time to do some breath work. The breath work's never really been big for me. That's been challenging. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing now. I would love to get back into somatic again
Hmm.
and see if that would help me more.
I think I'm very interested in somatic therapy because I think
Hmm.
like I've heard that the saying that trauma is a full body response, but I found that so true in terms of panic attacks because you're constantly, contracted, you're constantly trying to sort of prepare yourself and hide yourself and appear normal and like there's
Yes.
so much of just suppression. And
Yeah.
so I think it'd be really interesting to I know with a lot of somatics, it's trying to sort of, you know, open your body to what emotions are there rather than locking them away. Um,
Right. Right.
but yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like we're only just like learning the very basics of that, like
Yes.
tip of the iceberg with all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so too. I think
Yeah,
so too. I'm just glad. I'm grateful to be living in an era where there is so many tools and resources as opposed to back in like my grandparents' day or something where it's like electroshock therapy or mental hospital. I don't have to worry about that.
exactly.
There's a lot of awareness about it. So I'm very grateful for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Even
granted.
as a kid though, I would say that
Mm.
like you said back then, it was let's just get this fixed as quickly as we can. And
Yes.
in the time I've been taking medication, everything's changed.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I look back and I wonder how things would have changed if my parents had handled it differently. Gotten gotten me different resources and didn't immediately jump the gun and put me on medication. But I know that they were just doing, they were
Yeah,
scared and they were
for
doing with
sure.
the best that they could at the time.
Yeah.
And
As a parent, it's like,
yeah,
let's get our kid back to school and back to feeling like
yes,
themselves. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned with your daughter, you're worrying about is it going to
Yeah.
pop up with her? How
Yeah.
how have you managed that with parenting? Because I see my daughter mimicking some of my anxious behaviors a lot, and
Okay.
I'm
Yes.
like I'm like, don't do what I do. Do what I
Yes.
say, not what I
Do
do.
as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do you go with parenting and managing it all?
Although the flip side of that is she is not like me in that she's very much an extrovert, loves to talk, loves to be social. So I was not like that at all as a kid. It's like, oh, where did she come from?
Yeah.
And fortunately, I haven't seen her exhibit any of those signs, although she does seem to be quite attached to me. So she's very concerned about my safety and well being. If I leave, it's always, be careful, mommy. Or she'll even go so far as saying, don't die, mommy.
Oh,
Like, oh,
yeah.
goodness. Okay. So then I start to overthink that sometimes and going, is this a red flag of, you know, of anxiety that's kind of coming around the corner? But for the most part, she hasn't, neither of my kids have shown any of that. So I'm grateful for that. But it's more like just, well, once puberty sets in, like it did for me, is that when it will start surfacing.
Yeah.
Um, I would say in the early years of their childhood, it was a lot harder to balance my anxiety and their needs
Mm.
because they were so dependent
Yeah.
and I had no help. It was just my husband was gone a lot of time at work and I had no immediate family to help me out. So it was just literally me and my, and I look back and go, oh, I did it. I did it. I had my 3-year-old and my newborn and I did it.
Yeah.
Somehow I did it. um, so it's gotten easier as they gotten older because they're more independent and
Yeah.
they can really vocalize and things of that nature. But at the same time, I feel like almost like I want to confide in my daughter because she feels like an old soul and is wise and I got to remember, oh, she's only a child.
Yeah.
Don't dump on her,
Not
but she
yet.
has questions. She has a lot of questions and she idolizes me and wants to know all about my childhood and all these things and I'm like,
Hmm.
I gotta really censor some things or just you know stagger what I tell her
Yeah.
when it's age appropriate. But
It's hard to know the
so yeah,
line with kids. Like,
yes.
you wanna I try and be very open with Lila about how I'm feeling, but then sometimes Anthony will be like, "That's a lot of information for a kid."
For a
Like,
little
I'm
kid,
like, "Oh."
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to talk their head off and dump my problems on them. But at the same time, it's sometimes I find myself if I'm in tears or in the midst of it, I try to give it in short bursts of like, mommy's just feeling a little upset right now. And
Yeah.
I'm not a little anxious, but I'll be okay. And
Yeah.
usually that's enough. But yeah, they don't know the full picture and they shouldn't, but um, I'm I'm wondering, yeah, when she gets a little bit older around puberty time, that's what if she'll have a similar experience, or that's when something will showcase. But at
Yeah,
least I know a lot more than I did then, so
for
I
sure.
feel much more confident
Yeah.
how I would handle that.
I feel like a lot of it is having a way to cope and learning those coping skills, um, learning how to, release excess adrenaline and things like that. And even just self-care basics. As a kid, I don't remember being taught in school how important things like sleep are for your health and
Yes.
proper
Yeah.
nutrition. Like we got taught the food pyramid, but that was about it. You know,
Yes.
I feel
Exactly.
like
Yes.
it's if we give our kids, if we equip them with you know the knowledge that they need on how to cope when you are feeling panicked, then half the battle is won, I think.
Yes. I think so. Life skills. Yeah, I think that's monumental. And just the emotions that come up and how to handle those emotions based on the situation you're in at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's unfortunately left out, and it's of
Yes.
the system, and it's up to us parents to, talk to them about it and show them. But like, well, I really can't show you because I'm still learning, but I can read about it and give you
Yeah,
some
well, I
techniques.
mean,
And
learn together.
yes, exactly, we're learning together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Your daughter sounds like she's yeah, Like Lila sometimes is an alien to me. I'm like, I don't know where
Oh,
you get
really?
that from, but it's
Yes.
not from me. But yeah, it
Yeah.
teaches me so much, and I learn from her. So your daughter sounds a bit similar.
Yes. Yes. I tell her that too. I'm learning just as much as you are from me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots to offer.
Yeah. So what are your these days, what's your main symptoms, I guess? Like, is it still mostly the health, hospitals and that kind of thing, or is there other ways it manifests?
Yeah. Yeah, it's mostly health. That's why I looked back and I was petrified to give birth, but I did it and it worked out. So I look back when I'm feeling really, doubting myself. So yeah, right now it's still like hospitals, medical settings. I don't know why I've never had an issue in those places.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
I know my dad would say, he would tell us things back in his day of, we call them horror stories, his version of horror stories that were just like things that had gone awry and things that went bad. And maybe he planted some seeds in my head early on of not to be trustful of certain industries and whatnot. And now I think I've just kind of blown that out of proportion.
Mm.
So yeah, and then my husband went through cancer when our daughter was 6 months old, and that really
Wow.
blew things up way out of proportion, even more so, because it was like, how can this be? I didn't see
Yeah.
this coming. And now it's like, okay, well, now I got to, every little symptom, I got to take it seriously because what
Hmm.
if I miss it and it's that, you know? So yeah, that's primarily it. And that's the thing. It's ironic because I've never had any catastrophic event,
Mm.
nothing that would make sense as to why I obsess over it and I get worried about it.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
I can't imagine having to go through that for both of you, and with a 6-month-old
yeah,
as well. That's
yeah.
intense.
It was very, very intense. Yeah, we got through it, but it was, it was, it felt like it would drew us further apart than closer together because we were both so fearful of
Yeah.
what the outcome would be, because we were so caught off guard and unprepared and didn't know what the future held. And um, but luckily, it was a very treatable cancer,
Mm.
and he had his chemo, and things have. He's fortunately been over a decade now, but
Amazing.
cancer free.
Yeah.
But that really did a number on me. And I felt, looking back, I go, gosh, I was so selfish because I kept thinking about, I was panicking, going to chemo with him, or, when he'd had his bone marrow test and things of that nature. I was like, oh, I can't, but I wanted to be there for him. And I just was like, I felt so bad, but I couldn't,
Mhm.
crawling out of my skin being in those situations. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard, but I mean, like you said, with giving birth, you do it. It's
You do it. You do. You
yeah,
really have a
when you have
choice
to
at
do
that
it, you
point.
do it.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. So,
Yeah.
okay. Sounds like you've been through a lot. Um, and yeah, what's your goal for what are your goals for moving forward? Like I know you said it doesn't even need to be exotic travel, just
Right.
being able to go places in general without over
Yeah.
preparing maybe. But what
Yeah.
for you, what would be your, ideal growth in the next couple of years?
Mm. I I really want to get outside of my head and be way more present because I'm constantly in the future catastrophizing, and waiting for the shoe to drop. So I would
Yeah.
really like to get focused on being much more present and mindful. And I'm trying to focus on being grateful and looking forward to things, having things on the horizon that I can really look forward to and make life worth living. Um, and I guess, yeah, just getting outside my comfort zone
Hmm.
in various ways.
Mm.
Um, I don't know, because I feel like I said, like I feel like I've tried all these different modes and I'm still not where I want to be.
Mm.
Functional, but I'm not where I want to be.
Yeah.
Um, and I really don't know what that looks like for me personally.
Yeah.
I feel okay, I got this, I'm good, or um, I'm content. Yeah,
Mm.
because it feels like it's still as you get older, more things seem to pop up. And
Yeah.
um, I just really would like to get a hold of my reactions and my thoughts. Like, why does everything have to be a bad, worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Why can't it go the other way ever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that constant fight or flight, that defensive mode,
Yes.
always seeking
Always
out
being
like
on
the
edge.
edging. Yeah. Yeah. I know
Yes.
exactly how that feels, and it's
Yeah.
shit.
It
To put
is.
it
It's
bluntly.
very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there
Yeah.
was a focus on death there for a while, a lot. And I'm like, well, I don't want to go to the end of my life, looking back and going, wow, I wasted so much and I had good health and I had a good home life. And all I kept thinking about was, bad health and end of
Yeah.
life and all the things that could go wrong and
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
And what a waste. So I really, that bugs me. And that's a good motivator for me,
Yeah.
be more
Yeah.
present.
Yeah. I think I could do with being a bit more present as well. I'm
Yeah.
quite often off somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I know my kids see that. They're like, they want to get down and play with me and they want me to, do something, and I'm distracted.
Hmm.
I'm distracted and I'm trying to numb myself, and I'm trying to get outside my head, but doing what they want to do usually isn't enough for
Yeah.
me to be
Yeah.
fully outside of my head and be present. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on that note,
Yes.
probably know the question I'm going to ask.
Okay.
What's your advice to someone else struggling, feeling lost? What would be the one thing you'd say to
Yeah.
them?
Um, find your support system. Um, it's never as bad as you think it's going to be.
Mm.
Um, I had the most horrific thoughts before and thought everything would go wrong, and none of that ever happened. And I think there's like a quote out there of like, 95,
Yes.
95% of the time, whatever, it doesn't
Yeah.
go wrong, it doesn't work out that way. Our worries don't come to fruition.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, the support system, knowing that it's highly unlikely these worries are going to come to fruition, and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So maybe if you're not exactly where you want to be, you can be stable, and it can be sufficient, at least for a period of time. You can still get joy out of life. You can still do things that you didn't think were possible. I never thought I'd have kids. No, I can't do that. I can't have kids, even though everybody seems to have kids. For me, it was like, no, that's completely off the table. And for me, it's like that was monumental.
It is.
So I
It's
would
huge.
say
You
it
you've
is.
brought up two
It
healthy
doesn't feel
children. You're
huge now.
wonderful.
It doesn't feel huge, when I look at the outside world. I'm like, everybody seems to have kids, but for me personally, that was a huge deal. It's a big, big build up, and it's made me a better person because now I have something to live for. I have something to aspire to. So I would say, even if it's not having kids, but just, you know, I would have loved to someone say that, yeah, I know this is really rough right now, but I promise you, you're not always going to feel this way. It's temporary. It's temporary, just like a panic attack. Even though it feels like it's never going to end, it always ends. It
Mm.
always tapers out, and there is hope on the other side. That would have been really beneficial to me back then. I would have felt like I really had something to cling to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I gotta stop asking this question in interviews because
Yeah.
it always makes me teary
Chokes you up.
when I hear the answer. I'm like, no. That's beautiful. I love
I
that.
mean, does anyone ever say anything the opposite of that? Do they ever go like, well, sorry, you're out of luck?
Yeah.
There's
Pardon the
no,
fuck up. No.
yeah,
No, everyone, I
good.
mean, that's the thing. Like
Yeah,
we all know this stuff.
we do
Um,
innately.
and we can guide other people through it, and we can help other
Yes.
people. But it's just when it comes to ourselves,
Yes.
we seem to have these blinders on.
Yes. Yes. And it
Yeah.
helps to really have that like-minded community. So your page and podcast, it's so helpful, especially in those moments when you're like, I am the only person that feels this way. I am
Yeah.
an oddball. No one else has this fear.
Yeah.
And then you find that, oh my gosh, no, there's other ones out there, and it sits well with, I mean, not that you want misery loves company kind of thing, but it's just reassuring to know that,
It is
you
though.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
It makes you wonder how many people you know in your everyday life are actually hiding those same things that you've tried to hide
yes,
and
yes,
feeling the same way. Yeah,
yes,
we're all just
yeah.
bumbling our way through life.
And I'll say, someone said to my son the other day, to a kid, that I'm not afraid of anything, and he went, "Everyone's afraid of something." I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, good. I guess I think I imparted that on him because I think I've said that to him. Of no, it's you can't not be afraid of. Everyone has something that,
Yeah. That's it. We
yeah,
do. It's human nature.
yes, it's part of being alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your anxiety
Yes.
story. I very
Yeah.
much appreciate it. If anyone wants to
Yes.
contact Felicia, I will tag her Instagram. Um, but yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren.
No worries. Thank you for listening to the Us Anxious Folk podcast, the podcast for the chronically overwhelmed, perpetually panicked, anxious folk in all of us. If you would like to find more about me, you can find me on YouTube at Lauren Rose or on Instagram at Lauren R_Rose.